62 million American households once paid to watch television on someone else's schedule, locked into bundles they did not choose, and sitting through ads they could not skip. Cable was not just dominant, it felt permanent. Then Netflix killed the entire model so fast that cable lost 40% of its revenue in a single decade. It all began with one everyday frustration nobody thought needed solving. A cable bill landed in the mailbox each month like clockwork, and for most households, it was never small. By the mid-90s, the average American family shelled out $23 every month just for basic cable, more than double what it had cost a decade earlier. The price hikes came with a catch. You could not just pay for the channels you loved. Instead, you were locked into bundles, paying for dozens of networks you would never watch, just to get the handful you actually cared about. HBO and other premium channels were often tied to the same package, so skipping was not an option unless you wanted to lose access to the latest hit show. Even with all those channels, real control was out of reach. TV schedules ruled the living room. Miss a favorite episode? Tough luck. You would have to wait for a rerun or hope someone remembered to set the VCR. 46% of total TV hours were still spent watching live, linear programming, the kind that demanded you show up on time or miss out completely. The rest of the dial sat mostly ignored, a blur of niche channels and late-night infomercials. And then there were the ADS. Commercial breaks sliced through every program, sometimes stretching longer than the scenes themselves. Cable networks raked in billions of dollars from advertisers, filling the air with pitches for cars, cereal, and cleaning spray. The remote became a lifeline, a tool for muting the noise, but never quite enough to escape it all. For 62 million households, this was just how TV worked. The price, the ads, the endless bundles, most people accepted it as the cost of staying entertained. But underneath the surface, frustration simmered. A sense of being trapped, paying more for less choice, waiting for someone to offer a way out. A $40 late fee for a copy of Apollo 13. That is what pushed Reed Hastings over the edge. The sting of that penalty did not just irritate him, it sparked a question millions of frustrated renters had quietly asked themselves: why should watching a movie at home feel like a trap? Hastings was not alone. Mark Randolph, a serial entrepreneur and his eventual co-founder, started testing the idea in the simplest way possible by mailing a CD to himself. It arrived in one piece. Suddenly, the postal system looked less like a relic and more like an untapped delivery network. On April 14th, 1998, Netflix shipped out its first DVD, Beetlejuice, wrapped in a red and white envelope. The pitch was as clean as the packaging. No late fees, no due dates, just a flat monthly subscription. Customers could keep a movie as long as they wanted, then drop it back in the mailbox when they were done. The idea flipped the script on the anxiety of video rental. There was no penalty for forgetting, no scramble to return a disc before closing time. The only limit was how fast you could watch and return movies, but convenience alone was not enough. By 2000, Netflix rolled out Cinematch, an early recommendation engine that learned from each user's ratings. Instead of wandering the aisles or scrolling endless lists, subscribers got suggestions tailored to their taste. The more you watched, the better the picks became. This was not just about skipping late fees anymore, it was about making movie night personal, easy, and just a little bit addictive. Behind the scenes, the team hustled to scale up. Randolph later described those days as rapidly going broke, becoming successful. But the bet paid off. Netflix's DVD by mail model did not just solve the pain points of cable and Blockbuster, it proved Americans would pay for freedom and control, not just content. That first leap, from penalty fees to prepaid postage and personalized picks, set the stage for a much bigger disruption on the horizon. The first time Netflix tried streaming, the promise sounded almost too good to be true. Watch movies instantly, no disc, no wait. But reality hit as soon as the buffering icon started spinning. In January 2007, the streaming beta rolled out to a handful of subscribers. The catalogue was tiny, just a few thousand titles, and there were strict monthly caps on viewing hours. Most homes barely had the minimum 1.5 megabits per second needed for smooth playback. For many, the picture froze or stuttered, and every pause reminded viewers that the internet was not built for television, at least not yet. Skepticism spread quickly. Analysts called streaming a novelty, not a threat. Cable executives shrugged off the experiment, pointing to bandwidth limits and the fact that only a fraction of United States households even had broadband. But behind the scenes, Netflix's engineers were already looking for fixes. They knew that if streaming was going to work, it could not just limp along on borrowed infrastructure. The company began building its own content delivery network, planting the first seeds of what would become Open Connect. Instead of relying on distant servers, Netflix started placing custom-built servers called Open Connect appliances inside internet providers' networks, slashing the distance data had to travel and cutting down on buffering. Device makers took notice. In 2008, Roku launched its first streaming box built specifically for Netflix. Suddenly, streaming was not just for the computer, it jumped onto the living room television. Each new device brought more people into the fold, and every technical hurdle cleared raised expectations. The pressure was on to make streaming seamless, to kill the spinning wheel, and deliver instant, reliable video. As the technology improved, the old doubts began to fade, and the groundwork was laid for a viewing revolution that would soon change everything. Ted Sarandos sat in a windowless meeting room, scanning a spreadsheet that didn't just show what people watched, it showed how, when, and why they stopped. This was not gut instinct or Nielsen ratings. It was a live feed of human behavior measured in millions of clicks, pauses, and rewinds. By 2013, Netflix had more than data. It had a map of what kept people glued to their screens. That year, the company did something no cable network had dared. It greenlit a full season of House of Cards, sight unseen, betting $100 million on a political drama because the numbers said viewers would devour it. No pilot, no test audience, just a mountain of viewing patterns, and a belief that the algorithm knew best. The gamble paid off. House of Cards dropped all at once in February 2013, and suddenly the old idea of waiting a week for the next episode felt prehistoric. Orange is the New Black followed that summer, another data-backed original, and binge-watching exploded into the mainstream. Viewers burned through entire story arcs in a weekend. The numbers told the story. After the release, Netflix saw a spike in completed seasons and a surge in new signups. Internal memos revealed that binge habits drove not just engagement but loyalty. People who binged originals were far less likely to cancel their subscriptions. By 2015, high-speed internet reached 73% of US homes, and smart televisions and streaming boxes had become living room staples. The barriers that once held streaming back, slow connections, and clunky devices were crumbling. Netflix's data-driven originals were not just hits. They were cultural events, reshaping how people talked about television. The binge model rewired expectations, making the old cable schedule look slow and inflexible by comparison. For the cable industry, this was not just competition. It was a warning shot. The rules of TV had changed, and there was no going back. Cable television's collapse wasn't just a slow fade, it was a free fall. Between 2010 and 2020, United States cable revenue plunged by 40%, wiping out nearly $30 billion in a single decade. Entire business models unraveled as viewers migrated to streaming, leaving cable operators scrambling to cut costs and reinvent themselves. But as Netflix and its rivals conquered the living room, a new problem took root on the consumer side. The average household now juggles 4.3 streaming subscriptions, each with its own password, price, and must-see show. Instead of one giant bill, families face a patchwork of smaller charges that add up fast. A recent survey found that 62% of Americans feel overwhelmed by the sheer number of platforms. What once felt like freedom now threatens to become a different kind of trap, choice fatigue, where endless options start to feel like no choice at all. Streaming's reign looks unshakable, but cracks are already forming. The return of ads, once cable's calling card, now powers a new breed of hybrid tiers. Netflix, Hulu, and Peacock have all launched AD-supported plans, chasing billions in advertising dollars without scaring away price-sensitive viewers. Meanwhile, the battle for live sports has exploded. In the past 2 years alone, streaming platforms have pledged more than $5 billion annually for rights to the NFL, Formula One, and global soccer leagues. These deals are not just expensive, They are reshaping what viewers expect from on-demand platforms, blending appointment viewing with binge habits. Behind the scenes, a different race is underway. Netflix, Disney, and Amazon have filed dozens of patents for AI that can recommend not just a show, but a specific scene or moment based on your mood, or even your facial expressions. The next step is not just picking what to watch, it is having an algorithm build a playlist that shifts with your attention, frame by frame. And as the number of streaming services multiplies, new aggregators promise to make sense of the chaos, bundling subscriptions under one bill and one search bar, ironically echoing the old cable bundle in digital form. Every breakthrough brings new vulnerabilities. The same forces that toppled cable, fragmentation, rising costs, and the hunger for simplicity could one day threaten streaming's throne. The question is not whether streaming will be disrupted, but what shape the next disruption will take. Streaming rewrote what it means to control your screen, and now that power is shifting again. With over 200 streaming platforms worldwide, choice has never been greater or more fragmented. No technology stays on top forever. Thanks for watching, and keep exploring how the next disruption might change everything.